Sodom and Gomorrah are two ancient cities mentioned in the Bible, most notably in the book of Genesis. The narrative of their destruction serves as one of the most famous accounts of divine judgment in the Bible, symbolizing sin, immorality, and the consequences of wickedness. These cities are often associated with sexual deviance and moral decay, though their story also encompasses themes of hospitality, justice, and the consequences of turning away from righteousness. Geographical and historical context. Sodom and Gomorrah were situated in the region of the Jordan River Plain, possibly near the Dead Sea in modern-day Israel and Jordan. Along with three other cities, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar, Sodom and Gomorrah were part of what is called the cities of the plain. These cities were fertile and prosperous, making them attractive places for people to settle, but they were also known for their moral corruption. Abraham's plea for the cities. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is closely linked with the patriarch Abraham, the father of the Hebrew people. In Genesis 18, God informs Abraham that he plans to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because of the grave sins committed by their inhabitants. Concerned for the righteous people who might live in the cities, Abraham pleads with God to spare them if even a few righteous individuals can be found. Abraham bargains with God, asking if he will spare the cities for the sake of 50, then 45, and finally 10 righteous people. God agrees to spare the cities if 10 righteous individuals can be found, but ultimately, not even that number can be found in Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot and his family. One of the few righteous people living in Sodom was Abraham's nephew, Lot. Lot had settled in Sodom with his family, and though he was a man of righteousness, he found himself in a city of moral decay. In Genesis 19, two angels disguised as travelers visit Lot to warn him of the impending destruction. Lot shows them hospitality, which is in stark contrast to the treatment the angels receive from the other citizens of Sodom. The men of Sodom surround Lot's house, demanding that he hand over the visitors so that they can know them, a term often interpreted as a demand for sexual violence. Lot, demonstrating the value of hospitality, refuses and even offers his daughters instead, though this act remains morally questionable. The angels intervene, striking the men outside with blindness, and instruct Lot to take his family and flee the city. They warn him not to look back as they escape. Lot and his daughters obey, but his wife, overcome by curiosity or sorrow, looks back at the burning cities and is turned into a pillar of salt as punishment for her disobedience. This image of Lot's wife looking back is a symbol of regret and attachment to a sinful past. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Once Lot and his family have fled to safety, the Lord rains down fire and brimstone, sulfur, upon Sodom and Gomorrah, utterly destroying the cities and all their inhabitants. The destruction is swift and total, leaving no trace of the once prosperous cities. This act of divine judgment is seen as a punishment for the rampant immorality, particularly sexual perversion, violence, and the lack of hospitality shown by the city's inhabitants. The exact nature of the sin for which Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed has been the subject of much debate throughout history. While traditional interpretations have focused on sexual immorality, particularly homosexual acts, other interpretations suggest that the cities were destroyed for their general wickedness, including greed, injustice, and inhospitality. The Bible itself references Sodom in different contexts to highlight a broader sense of moral corruption, not limited to any one particular sin. The aftermath and legacy. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah has had a lasting impact on religious, cultural, and even legal thinking throughout history. The destruction of the cities became a symbol of divine wrath and the consequences of sin, with Sodom and Gomorrah serving as metaphors for extreme moral decay. In Christian theology, the cities are frequently referenced as warnings against turning away from God's commandments. The New Testament mentions Sodom and Gomorrah as examples of judgment, particularly in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, where Jesus uses them as warnings to cities that reject his teachings. The letter of Jude and the second epistle of Peter also mention Sodom and Gomorrah in relation to divine judgment and the consequences of sin, emphasizing their destruction as a cautionary tale for future generations. In Jewish tradition, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is seen as a reflection of the importance of justice and righteousness. The narrative underscores the value of hospitality, an essential virtue in the ancient Near East, and the obligation to care for strangers and travelers. The term sodomy, derived from the name Sodom, became associated in medieval times with certain sexual acts, particularly those considered unnatural by religious authorities. This association influenced the moral and legal discourse on sexual behavior, particularly in Christian Europe, where sodomy was often used to condemn homosexuality. However, this interpretation of the Sodom and Gomorrah story focuses narrowly on one aspect of the city's sinfulness and does not reflect the full scope of their moral transgressions as described in biblical texts, modern interpretations and relevance. In more recent times, scholars, theologians, and cultural commentators have revisited the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, offering alternative interpretations of the sin that led to their destruction. Some argue that the story is not primarily about sexual immorality but about the lack of justice, the oppression of the poor, and the mistreatment of strangers. This interpretation finds support in other parts of the Bible, such as the book of Ezekiel, where the sin of Sodom is described as pride, gluttony, and neglecting the needs of the poor and needy, Ezekiel 16:49-50. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah also raises questions about divine justice and mercy. Abraham's plea for the cities illustrates the tension between justice and mercy, as he advocates for the innocent who might be swept away with the wicked. The fact that God agrees to spare the cities for the sake of a small number of righteous individuals highlights the biblical theme of God's willingness to show mercy, even in the face of overwhelming wickedness. At the same time, the ultimate destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah reflects the biblical idea that justice must prevail when sin reaches an intolerable level. In contemporary culture, the story continues to be a point of discussion in debates over morality, justice, and sexuality. The narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah is sometimes invoked in political and religious arguments about the relationship between society's moral standards and divine punishment. However, more nuanced interpretations focus on the broader ethical lessons of the story, emphasizing the importance of hospitality, compassion, and justice. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is a powerful and multifaceted narrative that has shaped religious thought, moral discourse, and cultural interpretations for centuries. While traditionally associated with sexual immorality, particularly homosexuality, the story also addresses broader themes of injustice, inhospitality, and moral decay. Its legacy as a warning of divine judgment remains influential, while modern interpretations continue to explore its relevance to contemporary issues of justice, mercy, and morality.